And we are back. All right. Okay, so where did we leave off? So the thing we talked about before was, goodness gracious, what were we talking about? The reader. So we got the reader all working. We don't need all this lift F2. We don't need any of this stuff right now. So let's just get it out. We still want the read JSON, write JSON, and ask. So we do want the pipe K. So this is what we have now. Okay. So we'll bring our pipe K in and we'll do const flow is equal to, not minus, equal to, and here we'll do pipe K. And again, this is just going to pipe together Kleisli arrows, make them all nice and silly. And we want to read our JSON from our file, which is going to be data.json. Okay, so if we look here, there's our data.json file. Let's go ahead and delete this bad boy. And yes, remove the buffer, and we'll refresh so everything's good. All right, and then we want to actually, no, and we don't want this, so we'll df this and take those out. And then here with the write JSON, we need to actually partially apply the output file. So we'll say output.json. Right? So now this gets us a function to where all we need to do is call fork, and we'll call fork on flow and pass in our input file, which of course is data.json, like we've said before, and we'll get that back. It gets us our actual JSON file. And if we look here, it went ahead and it outputted that file. So now we have all of our asyncs and all that set up. And just for people, this is the output. We didn't do anything to it. We just read it in. It's basically a very expensive copy. But what we want to do now is modify it and things like that. So the real bummer to this whole thing is we are specifying this. This is not configurable. This flow is not configurable in any way. We hard-coded this. Now we could do some really silly things like environment and do all this, but then this whole flow is tied to this environment. I mean, which is fine. It's basically what we're going to get anyway. But then we need to have this return the pipe K, stuff like that, and then we can bring in the environment, so we can now pass, env into this, but we would want to do env dot, input file, right? So we're still hard coding these very specific things off of this flow and making it that way, and this would be env dot output or something, right? So that will pass the input. This will get us the same thing. So now if we call flow with data.json, we can make this const data is equal to, and actually let's call this environment just so it kind of matches with the language. This thing right here could be, what was it, input and output. So we could do something like this, data.json. And output is going to be output.json. And this would work right? So we should get the same thing back, and it does the output. So we can show that it's doing something different. We'll do output B and refresh, and we see we get our output B, right? So it's still the same thing doing all that, but now we did the same thing. This isn't very extensible. All we did was made it feel like it was extendable, but it's not really. So let's just get rid of this, and we'll get rid of this and get rid of that. Beautiful. So it would be really nice if we could set up an environment, set up a flow with this that we could use our just provide a wrapper for our read JSON functions and things like that that would actually work for us. So we can pass in the environment and it'll work for our flow, right? So one of the ways we can capture this, right, is by using a reader, which is the whole point of this whole thing. So we'll have this environment here, and instead of flow, we'll just do this M and we'll do run with. Okay, so let's set up M just real quick, and we're going to do it in this Fluent style. We'll probably, who knows, depending on if we have time to refactor or whatever. Yeah. So we'll take this reader, which is M, and we can just use identity here. And actually, let's not use identity. Say we want to get this prop off of there. Say we want input, right? So we can do input, and this will, of course, pick it. R comes after I. We bring a prop in. So now we have a reader that's there. We can run with that, and we'll get back. Oops. Oh, Vim problems, huh? All right. So now we'll get back, you know, just data or something. So now we have this reader that can take in an environment and it'll apply things to that environment and what have you, right? So let's make an input, right? So we'll make a little function that we call input. And since we need this to be a reader, we're going to just make this an ask. And what we want to ask of this is, so what we want to do is we'll set our first read up so we can actually see the read and read the JSON. And we want to pull that input off of there. So we can kind of see like what it returns. Hold on one moment. So because of that whole Kleisli thing, it's really nice that if we can write it to where it's going to be expecting some sort of async to come in or whatever. So let's set it up. So this way it doesn't matter any point in the chain. Like we could set it up. Here, let's just show you how one of the ways we could set it up, right? So we could ask this, and we will do a, let's see, should we do the ask? All right, so let's make this an actual function. So this is going to be an A for async, and we're going to get an async that comes in. So what we need to do now is return a reader that takes an environment, and now we have our little read JSON is going to return the async that we need. So we just do our read JSON, and from there we can bring in input, right? So here we'll do one of these and just say input. So now we have this input function that will then come off of that, and then we can pass input to it, right? So if we do run with here, so the first thing we need to do to set this flow up is to actually have a reader. So we'll do const m is equal to, and let's just call it R for the reader. So we'll do const m or const R is equal to input, and then we need to set something up to do this. So we can do a reader.of, and we want it to be just an async. So since we don't really care about the input or anything to this, we'll just do a reader of, we can just make it a unit, right? So we'll just do an async of, and it doesn't really matter, we'll just put a blank string in. We need to bring async in now that we're playing with the async. Because of that of, basically. And when we get to the transformer, the monad transformer, a lot of this calling of and all that, we shouldn't have to ever really reference our inner type. So we'll take this, the reader of, and that's going to get us back that. So if we call fork, and we're going to call fork on r.runWith, and we'll run with the environment. At this point, it doesn't matter. See how we get a resolved, how would you say, resolved blank string? We get that back because this reader run with will return the async, and then we're immediately calling fork on that. So since this reader, inside of it is an async of, how would you say, blank string, that's what we're going to get back. So now we have this input here that's going to take it takes an async, and it's going to take an async that is error, and what should the other thing be? We'll just call this E for now. So it's going to take an async of A, or of E, and in object, we're just going to put an A for now because we really don't use this A in this one. We don't really care about something coming into us, but we could, if we want to do some data, things like that, like maybe carry the data on, we could bring in data here. So that way it works at any point in the chain, but that's not an issue right now, so we don't need to worry about that. So this is going to take an async E of A. In this case, it would have been a string from here, because this is what's going to get passed into it, but we're ignoring it anyway, so we don't really need to care about that. And then it's going to get us back a reader of async. E to object, because this will get us an object back, but it could get us back an error. But if everything's good, we're going to get an object back. So that's what this is taking as an async. So now, since the input of this is going to be an async of A, I can now do a chain on this and use input, and we get it back. So that's all we have to do to get that input there, to get the file to load in. And it reads from this input file. And just like everything else, if this file doesn't exist, see how we change this environment? We get back the rejected. So just by doing this and setting it up where we have a reader that's going to return the proper type that we want, which is the async, we're now able to create these functions. And even though it's all spelled out here, if you were to think about this abstractly, this is still following that wonderful, my favorite type signature, my favorite signature, A to M of B. So in this case, A is this async of A, and then it's going to get you back the M, which is a reader, which holds an async of E object. Right? So this follows that same bit there. So now all we need to do to write this is kind of do the same sort of thing. So we can create something called an output here, and we'll just call this output. So this will be what our final output is, but instead we want to grab output off of the environment that we're passing in. So now I can do my read JSON, but now we care about this. So this needs to be the async that we're bringing in, right? So this is going to get us our A, and this is the function that's going to be called. So it's going to take the result of input, and that's what this A is going to be. And that's going to be the data that we want to write out to our string or to our file. So remember that write JSON, delete to capital J, so we'll do write JSON. Write JSON is a binary function that's curried. It doesn't really matter in this case because we're not really applying it, but it's going to take the output file, or like where we want to output it to, and then, see, I'm doing this wrong. And this, I'm used to using a transformer. So really, what we want to do, we need to hook up this inner thing. So we need to take this A, which is the async that's inside of there, and we need to chain in this value. Okay, so since write.json is partially applied, or it's a curried function, all we do is take the output here, and then we need to chain it to the underlying async that's here. And then this will get us just the output. And this is where like your monad transformers and stuff really pay for themselves. We don't need to do a lot of this setup like calling chain on A. It just knows to automatically take whatever we're doing and chain it to the underlying monad that's there. So now all we need to do to write this out, let's just make sure we don't have anything written right now. So we'll call this, first we need to replace that. We'll call this output, just keep it all output. So then what we need to do is chain output. And because, again, this matches the same structure as this is going to take that, except this needs to be any A that needs to be written out, so it could be anything. It just so happens that this returns an object, and it's always going to return an object. But is it? And the answer is no. No, it's not. Now, this doesn't need to be the same type as this A, because remember, if we have our JSONs in array, this is going to kick back an array. If it's a number, it's going to kick back a number. It's just going to work that way. So we can't really say it's always going to be an object, right? So I always forget that. So now this is going to take anything as well, but it's going to take an async of E in anything, and it's going to kick us back a reader of A. Now remember, a reader of async of EA. So remember that our write.json is going to just act like a tap function. And that tap function, let's look at our helpers here. And if we look at write.json, all this does is it does our write async, and then we're going to map the constant of whatever data that we got back. So anything that we passed into it, we're going to echo that back to it, because write async, or the write function that the file system fs provides in Node, it resolves to a undefined. And we don't want undefined. We want to keep our data chain intact, our integrity intact throughout this flow. That's the problem with site affecting functions like writes and reads and things like that, is you're not guaranteed. The output is sometimes not the best thing in the world. That's why functions like tap exist. And this is just basically a poor man's tap. We could have wrote out a helper that would do that tap the way that we want it done. But we don't need to, so it's all good in the hood, as they say. All right, so now that we have that, this is going to kick us back the result. So we would still see the end result of that data, but there's going to be a side effect happening through this async that's going to write to our output file that we have specified in our environment. So I don't know if you guys saw what this looked like before, but it was pretty gosh darn ugly to get it in there. Like we had to pull stuff off of the environment, we had to do this, had to do that, and then position it where it needed to go in various places. So by wrapping it in this reader, we can take all of that delegation and put that delegation in these specific functions that actually pull from the environment that we care about. We don't need to consider all of the environment in one go. We can just pull out what's acceptable for us and what's important for our flow, and then use the underlying monad to take care of like how it's being built out. And in this case, it's an async monad. All right, so now let's give this what I like to call a save, and we should have our output.json show up. And there it is. So now we have that. There's our config, rainbows are true, all of that is great. And our environment is injected in. So say we don't want it to be there, say we want it to be somewhere else. Maybe we're running this on a dev server somewhere, or I'm sorry, a production server, and we need to output to S3. Well, we can just use our our async and make a function that will write to S3 as an async, and even change this output to be what we want our S3 key to be. Like, it doesn't matter what the underlying thing is that you're wrapping. That's the beauty of these ADTs. It doesn't care what's going on inside of it. That's what makes a functor a functor, is it will always just do what it's supposed to do in the underlying context. And then you get cool embellishments like the ability to reject or resolve or things like that. So now this is great and all for the reader. Now one of the things you'll notice, by the way, this is the library that I'm using for building these things. So one of the things you'll notice is we have this reader monad that comes with it. Down here we have that reader monad. But when you're doing things like this, you don't typically want to do it just straight up in a reader. Like, it's a real pain in the bum to have to set up this chain every time. Of course I'm chaining. I'm doing something very specific with this reader, and it contains something. I need to understand that, oh, I have this async. Notice I brought async in here because I had to do this async.of and all of that stuff. I shouldn't have to care about that underlying monad. It should just do stuff for us. So that's where transformations or transformation monad transformers come in. We don't have it in, as I was saying before, it's not in Crocks now, but I plan on having a transformer for state, transformer for reader. There was an IO. I'll have a transformer for IO to start off with. So this will handle all the underlying stuff. Well, there's some technical debt I need to pay back on this library before I can get that in. And I've been toying with like interfaces and concepts and things like that. So I don't have it in Crocks yet, but it's basically going to do this sort of stuff, right? Like, this doesn't have any of the error handling or any of the stuff that I'm doing. Normally, these are just the algebras I had to figure out. So for instance, for ask is basically a chain on the inner monad now. So as my other ask always takes a function, this ask is going to actually just ask it of it, I guess. Yeah, that's it. It's going to instead of applying the function as a map, it's going to take the function that you have following that wonderful function signature, a to m of b. I'm telling you, it's the best thing ever. Coolest thing ever. So you give it m, in this case would be your underlying monad, which of course is going to be the async in this instance. And then it's going to chain your function on that, so that way you can apply the environment to your underlying monad. Whereas other ones, they don't do that. They just give you back a reader, and it's up to you to like do your chain maps and stuff like that. But anyway, it's just, so this is what it's doing, and it basically takes all of the underlying stuff, all the things that I have to do here, like when I'm calling chain. So notice how, I mean, I don't really have to do the run with or things like that because it hooks everything up for me. But I don't have to address the actual chaining and things like that there. So let's move this over to a ReaderT. Again, this is not in Crocks right now, but it will be as soon as I get some technical debt paid back. Okay, so we'll do ReaderT. It's like Mr. T, but cooler. Okay, so now we're going to change this into the reader, just so you can see how much cooler it is. So I don't need to do this anymore, like doing the async of. So I can just do of, and it knows to call the of the underlying monad. So there, that gets rid of some of that boilerplate. Now for these here, I can do ReaderT, but now when I do my chain, I'm not going to get back, here it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to get back the A to do the chain on. No, 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 no. I'm going to get the actual value. So here I can do, we'll do data, right? This needs to be a Mr. T or a ReaderT. Mr. T is acceptable as well. So this needs to come in, and it's still doing the same sort of thing, except now I don't need to worry about the chain. All I need to do is call it with the data, right? So what I need to do is call it with the data. Yeah. So, and that's what I mean. It just takes away, notice now async isn't used anywhere. I didn't need to, oh, sorry. One important thing, I do need async in here. I was like, wait a minute, how do I have that? So I need to have a reader async, and I do my reader T, and then I pass in async. So now this will get me back a reader T or a reader T of async, basically. Sorry. And then these become reader asyncs. Let's see how many errors. All right, no errors. So we're all good. So now it's the same sort of thing, but I don't need to care so much about the underlying monad. I don't need to hook up the chain. I don't need to do anything like that. I don't see now. This is kind of a bummer, but it's fine. It's fine. Whatever. This needs to actually be output. Okay, and that's always going to give back that A. All right, so now let's do some, now that we have a way to read and write, we're basically just doing an expensive copy of things. Don't need reader, don't need pipe K, don't need any of that. And actually, to be honest with you, let's go ahead and put this into more of a, because remember how we used the pipe K for doing the same thing with async, and we were doing that with reader, we just used this pipe K. Well, now we can get, because it generically follows that A to M of B, how would you say, flow, or I'm sorry, signature. Because it follows that, we can use pipe K with anything. Well, anything that has those signatures. So now we can do the same sort of thing. And here all we need to do is, since we're ignoring it, I mean, we could put something in, another like environment or another way to specify an input to the first one. It doesn't really matter. But what we're going to do, just so we can lift it properly, is we'll do a reader sync of, and that's of course going to do what we were doing before. And then here, all we need to do is input and output. And R is not, doesn't exist anymore, so now this is flow, and I mean we can pass it with anything, but right now it's just a unit or an undefined. We're not passing anything in, we kind of ignore it up here, so we don't really need to pass anything in with flow, but this will now get us the same thing, and we don't have to do all of that weird dot chain, dot chain, dot chain. We actually just get a function that would work. Now if we did care about this, it would take the first, like if we passed something in here like let's see, like human baby or something, right? It doesn't really matter because we're not doing anything with human baby because input doesn't take anything. But that would get us the of human baby, or we could, you know, keep it the way we had it before and just pass in a blank string. One of the things we could do is make this actual data too. So What if we do all this writing, we do things like that? What if, so we have this as data, right? What if we want to concat whatever this is to what we read from the file, right? So that would be pretty gosh darn cool. So how we can do that, say we want to initialize this with empty object. Okay, so now we have an empty object, and this is going to be the data flow inside of the asyncs themselves. It's just going to be the data flow in there. So what we want to do is, if we do this, we're going to get a read JSON back, right? And it's going to have that input. So now what we can do is just map assign or assign on this bit here, and we'll assign data to with whatever comes back. So we need to bring assign in. Assign is another helper function from Crocks. Okay, so now we have assign. We don't need prop anymore, and we don't need that reader either. That way we just have everything that we need. All right. So what we can do now is say assign that data to it, right? Okay, so right now we just have a blank string. But what if we call this with Bob, right? So say we want to set Bob to true. Who cares? I mean, Bob's a good guy. No one should really talk anything bad about Bob. He's pretty awesome. So we'll put Bob awesome. Now check this out. So now I get Bob awesome, and guess what I wrote to my file? Bob awesome. See? So that's just another way, because of that function, I'm able to do things like, you know, map this. The other thing we could do to get around this write JSON, if we wanted to, you know, do something with it, because right now it's just going to give back whatever we pass it, like we had it. We could have taken care of that here and just assigned it to a blank object. So it takes the result of that, ignores it, and then assigns a blank object to data or whatever. We could have done a lot of cool things like that. So now that we have this, let's see if we can make this a little easier to read. Some of these flows, you know, they can get a little ridiculous because now we have this map. We have all that. That's fine. That's readable. And we'll just match the pattern here. Even though it didn't go over the line too much, it's still fine to match the pattern. Never hurts, right? Wow, no questions or anything. This is crazy. Is this thing on? All right. So now I'll give this a save, make sure everything's good. And now we can actually default the data just by calling this flow. By doing this, we can default whatever we want the data to be. And we just make sure that D2 this. We make sure that when we call it, we put it in there. So now if we look here and look at our output, notice it's sans Bob. He's not in there. All right, so that's one way to inject data into this flow. And by using this transformer, the monad transformer, we didn't really have to consider, I mean, we have to consider with what we're returning, but I didn't have to do any of the plumbing and like call the of on this function or call chain on it and make sure that this chains properly. I can do everything in the context of the underlying monad, which is the important stuff in my opinion. All right. So we have that, we have that. Now let's do something a little more useful here. We'll just do one more thing. Hopefully this kind of demonstrates the power of this. It's pretty powerful, in my opinion anyway. Lets you build out these flows. Like we can have any sort of functions that work in this and work on this environment and looking for things. We can make kind of like a Lego set of these and just put them together, and they're built out specifically just for our application and our problem space, or what is that, our domain, so to speak, for our business logic. All right, so we have that. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like to modify stuff in here. So maybe we don't really care so much about what's going on with this. Maybe we don't care so much about. All right, so say after we read, we want to go ahead and we don't care about the environment. Say we want steps where we don't care about the environment, is what I'm trying to say. So maybe in this input, the problem with this though is it's going to set up the chain, and it's going to have to be chained. It's going to have to be chained, but that's fine. So let's put some modifications on here. So what would be a fun thing to do? What's in there? So maybe we want to take something from another file. That's what we'll do. So we'll add, and we will do, so say we'll call this config.json. Okay. Now you'll notice inside of our data.json, see how we have this config, and that's the config.json right there. We can use this like inside of this flow. Say we want to load everything that's in config.json, and we'll say items, and items is a just an array, and it has objects of a, it goes to 1. Okay. So we just have this items thing, and and maybe we have another thing called another thing. And another thing is just a thing, which is true. Who cares? It's just stupid config data. We don't really care about the darn thing. So now we have a really neat situation here. So inside of our actual data and the data that we're writing in, we're going to expect it to have some sort of config value. And if it has a config value, we want to load whatever's in config and then merge it to what we get put back to, just for now we'll do a merge, but I mean you can follow the same route and add different steps, like say you want to use that to modify whatever your output is before you write it out. You could do that. And that's the other reason why the state monad is a lot more powerful in doing things like this than the reader. I mean, the reader's cool, don't get me wrong, but with the state monad, I can read and modify and move back and forth between all of those. So, yeah. But we'll just do it with the reader. I'll come on sometime and actually do a do one on this stuff. All right, so we still have the same sort of flow here. We want to copy it over, except here we don't really care about the environment here. I mean, I care about the environment because, you know, it's only one world that we have, but we don't really care so much about the environment. So we could do a map or something here, but because we're inside of this pipe K for our flow, and that's what we've decided to go with, we, instead of doing a map, we're still just going to do a chain and have it set up for that. It's a lot easier. I mean, it doesn't hurt to chain a lot of things. So, but we do care about the data that we're getting. So what we want to do now is we want to take from the data, and we need to bring that data in. We want to grab the config off of this. So here, what we can do, what would be a fun way to do this? So since we care about the data and we're chaining this thing in anyway, we want to take the config off of that. Let's just do it the loosey-goosey way. And then we'll refactor it a bit. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Who cares? I would just destructure the attribute that we want off of it, but we need to return the data itself, or we need to have access to this entire data object. So we're just going to do it this way. Now we could set this up in a composition, do things like that, but this isn't really a lesson about composition and how to do those types of things. So we're just going to do it like this, right? So we want to do the same sort of thing, and we actually just want to do the same thing. That's exactly what we want to do. So what it's going to do is read in the file from that. Then it's going to take and get the result of that and then assign it to our data again. So just by doing this, we can now add our data. So now you'll see that our output actually read it in. So just by following that same pattern, doing this assign map, now that we've done it twice, we can probably take this reader function, or this reader async function, and kind of make it reusable, right? So let's look at our output file. We have our output file, and it did. It outputted exactly the stuff from reading in config. We could do other things like omit stuff. There's a lot we can do here, and all it is just following this pattern. And also now with that pattern of just calling these reader asyncs, if we want to change like this output, or maybe we want to output this but continue it going, right? So say we want to create another output. So we'll say output config. Watch this. This is how easy it is to just get this going, right? So say in our environment we have an output config. So we'll say config out .json, and then that's going to be our output config. So now we have this environment there, and for this config, let's just say we want to read the JSON in, and we don't really care so much. Well, I guess we kind of do care so much about that. What would be the best way to do that? So easy, right? I just said it was so easy. All right, so what we do is we get our output config. Okay, so that comes in, and then we can just do what we're doing here with our write JSON. And remember, this is all chained. So here we just do .chain. So now that we have that in and everyone's happy and doing great, we'll do that in a second. All we need to do is take our write JSON file, and we will apply output config to it. Okay, so now I chained that, we're doing that, and I don't want to do this anymore, right? So once I do this config and write the config to the place that the file needs to go, all I need to do now is just do a constant and return this back. And this is the same sort of thing as a tap. We're basically just doing a tap here. But this isn't really a lesson on tap, but just know constant. And we'll bring constant in here and head back down. So now, if everything works out, I'm probably going to get some errors here. Nope, I didn't get errors. So we'll look here, and we'll notice that we have this new config out, which is everything that's been written, but that didn't hurt our flow because we have our normal. Oh, this is config JSON. We have our normal output, which still has our original thing. But you know what? After we do this config, maybe we don't want that output, right? Like maybe at this point in time, we can go ahead and just omit that, right? So we don't want the constant of the data to come out. What we really want to do, is do an omit config data. Okay, and omit is again just another function that comes with Crocks. Okay. So now maybe we don't want the config. We already read from it. It doesn't need to be written. The only thing we want to write is maybe rainbows. And of course we get an error. And that's because omit needs to take an array. Is that what it says? What does it say? Yep, omit foldable required for first argument. All right. Sorry about that. It's my first day. So now, just by doing that and putting it in this simple flow, we've had everything that has to do with the config inside of here, reading from an environment that can now be adjusted just by passing in whatever the environment is. If we just want it to be config out or config silly, we can do config silly. And when we write it, we get a config silly. And we didn't have to adjust anything. We had complete control over the environment that we're injecting in. So, I don't know. Hopefully this is helpful. Does this make sense? Has anyone got any questions? Or, I mean, we can do anything to it at this point. It's just a matter of writing this little step in the process and then throwing it into our flow here. And then really our flow, I mean, we've reused things. We could reuse things over and over again, really, if we want to. But our flow is just this real simple thing here. And again, if we want to put other stuff, we can say other stuff. Right? And now we get other stuff. And we have other stuff written here. Wait. Oh, no, that's... Whoa, why is that? Oh, because it's just writing the file. Yeah, we want to interject that. So maybe we want to take a snapshot of what the data was. Anyway, that's pointless. So, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of all I got on this stuff. It's been about 50 minutes. Probably going to call it on this. You guys got any questions or anything? Nothing? I hope you can see. Now remember, we're just doing this with simple FS functions, but because of this async, and I mean this could be anything, again, like this output could output to a S3, and we can even have like a disjunction set up in there that if this is an array, then go ahead and use S3. If it's not, then write to the file system. Or we could base it on some input inside of that config file, and like it's real easy to just work with this. And I mean, if you're curious, read this through and see what it would take, or like go through and see the steps that we took to get this going, and just see what that looks like if you were to try to do this with a promise chain. I think you'd be very surprised, because this seems like super easy, right? Like to do in a promise chain, but I think you'd be pretty surprised on like what it takes to get this implemented in that and to make it extensible. And then, I mean, try changing it and things. And then also try it with your simple callbacks, like not wrapping things in an async. Just use these read file and write file from FS instead of doing things like we're doing here. Oh yeah, and that's the other thing. If any of these, check this out. So like say config JSON is malformed. We didn't have to think about this. Remember, we implemented this a long time ago. We implemented this first off and never had to think about it. But notice I parsed the JSON and it didn't break my entire application. And this is in a config JSON. We didn't read in config JSON for a long time. Like that was the last one of the last things we did. But because we set all this up like with result and did all that, we were able to just get it working and then move it into the background. Try doing that with promises. Like we would have to do all kinds of weird things with the catches and things like that just to get it to go, and you spend a lot of your time dealing with the promise itself. Did I fix that? Yeah, dealing with the promise itself and like how to deal with a catch and what happens if a then is called after that catch, or what if the catch was already used as a second function to the then function or a second argument to the then function. Like there's all that stuff you need to consider, but we just had this work. Like it just threw the error and nothing else that went wrong went wrong. It just worked. So I don't know. I know this is really quick and I tried to explain as much of it as I can, but there's just I don't know. There's a lot of stuff here. So if you can, I'm probably going to put this on the YouTubes, so it'll be on my YouTube channel. I've got all these recorded, so they'll be up there. And again, just play with Crocks if you're curious about this. If you don't like Crocks because of, like, there's some things with Crocks. Like right now, I'm not Fantasyland compliant. Probably won't be Fantasyland compliant until, well, I probably won't be. But that's okay because I provide all the functions that you'll need to work with it. You don't have to worry about working with Ramda and stuff. But I have my reasons for the whole Fantasyland thing. I don't want to get into them. I'll get into them at some point, I'm sure. But all the stuff that I talked about, except for this coalesce function, is going to work with, say you were to use the fantasy readers. Like you could use their reader, and I think they have a T. I think they have a, yeah. So you can use this if you want to try that and you're all scared about using my stupid library or something. You can do the same sort of stuff works with this. And they have the transformer already in there. Crocks, we will have it, but we don't have it yet. I don't know. So if you don't want to try with my library and you're still curious about it, there's a lot of other libraries out there. This has 8 stars. It's pretty good. A lot of people use it. For the async, if you don't want to use my async, there's Fluture, which is good. This is a good one. It's like my async, except they do a lot of other things. Do they have like bimap? Yeah, they have bimap. They have swap. I don't add like these things, and I don't have that for reasons. There's no reason. He has that, and it's cool. But there's the chain. Yeah. So I don't know. He's Fantasyland compliant too. So if you guys are all worried about the Fantasyland compliance thing, this is Fantasyland compliant. Static land compliant as well. But I don't know. I liked it. I used this, but I don't know. I use mine mostly. I do some things a little different. Stuff that's just worked out for me. In building these apps, there's a lot of things I don't like about some of the APIs out there that are just weird. So anyway, that's all I got. I'll paste this. I already pasted it. So I will be back on either tonight or tomorrow and start building that fantasy football application. It's just a pick 9 for a fantasy league. Mostly it's going to be Mechanical Turk stuff, but it's going to be a front end, back end, and utilizes, well, this is all I write is functional programming now. So it'll be using all of this stuff, but in actual, like, real use cases and not these contrived examples. These are all very just contrived. So if you want to check that out, be on the lookout for that. And I think that's all I got. Again, I'll put these 3 episodes up on YouTube until the live coding people say I can or cannot do that. Whatever. I don't know if they own our content or whatnot, but I'll have them available there. And yeah, that's all I got. Talk to you later.